revolution, 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 revolution.
We're in Paris with Malaak Shabazz.
Yeah, my first time.
Yeah?
My first time here in France.
How do you like it?
So far I have. I think everybody has been incredibly hospitable, lovely. This is my first time in Paris. I am staying in Saint-Denis I think I said that right?
Yeah.
Saint-Denis?
Saint-Denis.
For a few days. Some of the MOVE people and the Free Media people are staying there. I came here to speak at UNESCO.
Maybe first I'll have to introduce you because your name rings a bell.
Oh,
You're
I'm
the
sorry.
daughter of,
Dr. Betty Shabazz and Malcolm X. My name is Malaak Shabazz. I'm sorry about that. I'm an international human rights activist, and I'm also involved with several NGOs.
for which organization are you working?
With the NGOs, I'm dealing with Peace Action International, which deals with non-proliferation treaty. I'm affiliated with the Executive Committee on Disarmament, Peace and Security, which fortunately or unfortunately, with all of the irresponsible behavior and not handling right nuclear weapons radiation, it's affecting us all over the world now. With Japan, that horrible accident with the tsunami and earthquakes, and subsequently after that, President Barack Obama had our nuclear power plants tested, and it turns out that since 1993, one of the nuclear power plants, Indian Point, which is located in New York, has been slowly leaking. And we didn't know that. But that was under Clinton, under W. Bush, the second Bush. And so now that's being taken care of. I think people got a little lax and irresponsible and not really handling the environmental issue.
Because these nuclear plants are built for extreme circumstances, but apparently they're not built for as extreme circumstances as sometimes arise.
Right. I mean, they're certainly not environmentally friendly. Once you're contaminated, that's it. And I think a lot of people forgot about Chernobyl in 1986. That whole area is dead. Nobody can even habitate there. Japan, which is the third largest economy in the world, is going to affect the rest of the world. I'm also, and it's funny because Indian Point in Westchester, New York, the suburbs outside New York City, a lot of activists and wealthy actors and former President Clinton, they all live in that environment and nobody knew. These are $1 million homes and it's been slowly leaking. They apparently did some testing. Nothing is affected, so to say. But, I mean, I think with global warming and people trying to be green on a global level, they need to start thinking about the level of security health-wise for the planet. We cannot continue to play with uranium radiation and think that we're not going to be affected. Food is affected. I mean, for Christ's sake, the Japanese are importing rice. And that's your staple. It's unfortunate. I also deal with two other NGOs, PIPE, which is Partnership for Indigenous Peoples Environment. The United Nations ratified a resolution in 2007 giving indigenous people their rights back to their resources on their land. No longer can foreign governments come in to different environments and just reap the resources. I mean, they can, but those indigenous people have a right to fight for their resources when they never had that before.
As a nation or as a people?
Both. People or a nation. I mean, if a foreign government comes in, I mean, it's going to happen no matter what. Some countries will not be able to fight. Some will.
Yeah,
But in any case, under the UN Charter, which was adopted in 2007, if they have good civil society, grassroots, and NGOs that can help them, because some countries are centuries and centuries old and will not change their pecking order, their caste system. They just won't. But some Some countries will. So at least they have some protection on under the Charter of the United Nations. And it's not gonna happen overnight because it just happened 2007.
Thinking of one example which strikes me is Bolivia, for instance, where the government of Evo Morales decided to nationalize gas industry, and that's basically what he's talking about, is to use
That the government, right.
for the own people. But the indigenous people are now protesting against their own government for their...
Well, it's probably their land that was taken away, and generally the resources are on indigenous land. And then that's a fact. For instance, Dutch shell oil for a long time was tapping in Nigeria, and that was Ogoni land. They didn't have any permission to do that. But the government allowed shell oil to come in. Now they're gone and it's BP. But it's still a government contract. For instance, in Liberia, Charles Taylor was the sole beneficiary of the Firestone tire, the rubber plant. They called it the rubber plantation. They're no longer there, but he was the beneficiary of that, not the people. Firestone had a 100-year free lease. How? It's just, the business. It's unfortunate when you have corrupt government and outside corporations wanting to just tap those resources. Thank goodness Firestone's tires are out of business. And, hey.
Which goes basically to the core of a lot of problems we're facing today, is who owns the resources.
Right.
And what's being done with the profits.
Well, also, foreign governments, once they've had it, they don't want to give it up, nor are they going to. That mineral, I can't think of the name of it. Oh, shoot. I always forget. That allows me to have a cell phone. Or you have No. Begins with a C or something, but it's in Congo. And the Belgians aren't letting that go. They're not. They control Congo. Congo has been in civil war forever. Mobutu ruled from Belgium. He didn't live there. Then Kabila came in, and as a general, I don't think any military person should ever be head of state because they can't think clearly on a sensitive level. Tried to do the same thing, and it didn't work. He was killed. But, it really comes down to civil society, NGOs, and getting allies and support for your government and for the people there. Some people are going to die. But that's the only way you're going to try. Look, I'm the daughter of Malcolm X. Do you think he would stop to fight for human rights? Not for just black people, but human beings. And his life changed when he made his Hajj to Mecca. He was the first black, well, what do they call him back there? Negro, whatever. Even African Muslims didn't go. First black person ever to make Hajj to Mecca.
That's where he discovered that not all
Muslims, well, they look like you and me. And he came back and had to rethink things. He went to Asia. He saw Asians committing rights against Asians. He saw Europeans doing it. But unfortunately in the United States it was really a black-white issue. He realized it's not a black-white issue. He stopped thinking about civil rights. He started thinking about human rights. Because civil rights means you're asking your oppressor for better rights. No, you're the same. And the civil rights, human rights is, I have a right to be a human being by any means necessary. You're a human being, I'm a human being. If you have a loaf of bread, don't give me a slice, I want a loaf too.
Revolution, 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 revolution.
I'm just very fortunate that I had a very aggressive, strong mother. That really, when my dad was assassinated. Merci. Was assassinated and she was left with 6 girls. With no rights. What is she going to do about that? And it's not just her daughters. What about the other little girls? And it's a different reality when you're faced with, these are my children. And so she did a lot for women's rights on a global level for the 31 years after my father. I continue the legacy. I'm a human rights activist, but I really focus on the issues of women and children in third world countries.
And so you're here to address a meeting of the United Nations?
Yeah, at UNESCO. There's several different issues. I've been involved with the North Atlantic slave trade route for about 5-6 years. I wasn't in Durban, but I was in Durban Review in Geneva. They're going to have Durban 10 Plus in New York at the end of this year. This is the International Year of People of African Descent. Every year the United Nations has the International Year of. This is our year. They've been having different programs about the remembrance of the victims of slavery, myself. a lot of people here in France, all over the world. And it's our time to stop sticking our head in the sand like an ostrich and address the issue so we can move forward. We're not going to be able to move forward if we don't address the issue. It happened. Don't act like it didn't. Don't talk about abolitionists and post-colonialism when you're not talking about slavery. Slavery started first. You can have post-colonialism if you don't have slavery first. You can have abolition if you didn't have slavery first. So to teach, to miseducate the children, I think Europe doesn't want to acknowledge, all of Europe doesn't want to acknowledge their involvement in the slave trade. And unfortunately, the United States, who is a part of that, doesn't want to acknowledge the true meaning of democracy and the civil rights, human rights for men and women.
Some would say it's just part of history and let's get it over and done with because history is the past. But I read this week that today in the United States, for instance, there is more African Americans in jail or on bail than there were ever enslaved in 1850.
I don't know about more, but quite a considerable number has been increasing. A lot more women and young girls are going to jail more than ever before. That's probably why you see the increase. It's just kind of an equal balance of men and women. And unfortunately, I truly believe that happened. Well, it's just my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for everybody. But that happened with under Clinton, who thought he was the first black president, and he's pink. He's not black, and it's insulting and disrespectful for any true black person for him to say, I'm really black, and he wasn't.
He played the saxophone.
Which means what? Nothing. He can't dance. But he had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Nobody cared about that. He created that. He had 3 strikes, you're out. Meaning if you get caught again, you're going to prison. Yeah, if you get arrested for the 3rd time, you're going to jail. You're going for life. The full term if you're on parole, which is unheard of. And a lot of these petty crimes were happening. These weren't big issues. They were petty crimes. But your 3rd time, no, this was all under him. And it affected black and Hispanic men, young men and women. It truly did. And it's a fact. It's right there in our face.
Yeah. Would you say it was racist from the onset, or is it in its consequence? Because you say we wanted to fight crime?
I think it's subliminally racist. America is a lot more subliminally racist than Europe.
In what sense?
Racism is institutionalized. It's not blatant in your face like it is here. It's institutionalized. Laws are set up that are subliminally racist and will affect minorities in that country. Some non-minorities may get caught up in it, but overall it affects us. And under that law, once you go to prison for a considerable amount of time, when you get out and you've paid your debt to society, you've lost your right to vote. So therefore, what does that mean? That's racist right there. If more minorities are going, and never before, you could go to jail, come out, and still vote. Now you lose your right to vote, so your voice means nothing. That's institutionalized racism right there.
No, we're talking about 2.5 million people at this time.
They will not be able to vote in the United States for president, governor, senator, congressman, assemblyman, and the like.
They were probably not planning to vote for the Republicans.
Well, vote. They can vote. The thing is, it doesn't matter. Republicans, Green Party, Independent, Democrat. It doesn't matter. Some may, some may not, but they don't have that right anymore. It was taken away, and that's unconstitutional. But if you make a law, you make a law, and that's that. That has to be changed. They're trying to change now under President Obama, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Nobody cares about your sexuality in the armed forces. If you're a good soldier, you're a good soldier. That's it. But to say don't ask, don't tell, and then you say, well, I'm alternative lifestyle, you're removed and dismissed dishonorably from the armed services. Now you lose good soldiers. For instance, in Afghanistan, how many people do you know speak Pashtun? Not many. It's not an easy language to learn. And out of the 20 proficient Pashtun-speaking Americans, I think 11 or 12 were homosexual. They were career soldiers. They did a damn good job, but because of their sexual orientation, they were dishonorably discharged. Now, who are you going to get to fight? These young, uneducated country people who barely got out of high school, who don't know the difference in cultures, who can't speak the language, and get confused because they don't know who's who. It's just like in Somalia. When we went into Somalia, they didn't know who were the allies and who were the enemies or who were part of the warlords because everybody looked alike. But
And nobody wears a uniform.
not only that, they were inexperienced. You had experienced people who were there who basically made contacts, network. Nobody's going to trust you if they don't know you, and you know that in those environments. Now, it was unfortunate that helicopter went down, Black Hawk Down, and they dragged the bodies around. And I am not being insensitive, but what do you expect? You don't even know where you're going into. You don't know. They're not going to be... They walked into an ambush, but the people who are allies look like the people who ambushed them. They weren't properly educated, shown on a racial divide. You know, there has to be like racial sensitivity when you go in a foreign country, and they didn't have it.
So this talk about racism in the 21st century, one might have thought when your father was still alive that maybe racism would be over and done with in the 21st century. But for instance, in Europe we see that the right-wing parties are surging in basically every European country, and they have an overtly racist undertone.
That's what I'm hearing. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's probably because they don't want to recognize their part in the bigger scheme of things. For instance, you want these people coming in to work in your country to pay taxes, but you don't give them the right to vote or working papers. That's modern day slavery. You're not giving them the same rights that the average person has in this country. You colonize them. There's so many French-speaking countries in the Caribbean and in Africa. They should, and if you use their resources and their labor and their lives, and basically enforced on them that they had to speak your language, they had to have their history in your school, that you're not teaching their history in your country, it's not going to work. You know, that's still, that's another form of institutional racialism, but the thing is, it's so blatant here.
But maybe this racism is also due partly to the fact that in Europe people are starting to feel the economical crisis, and they blame those who are even poorer than they are, instead of looking up.
Well, what made them rich in the first place? The labor and the resources of other countries. Now that these people are coming in, now, you know what? Poor people don't get affected by what's going on in the economy because they know how to make by. It's the wealthy who are now becoming middle classes, then becoming economically challenged or angry at those who know how to live it anyway. But how did they get to that point? Nobody wants to deal with reparations, but your ancestors raped the world, and your family got wealthy on the backs of other indigenous people. But now that you may have not managed your resources properly, maybe like the economy is changing on a global level. It's not just here, it's everywhere, even in the United States. I have some people who said, I wasn't a slave owner, that was my ancestors. You're not giving the money back that he made off the backs of slaves. You don't want to give reparations to the people who have died to make your family legacy wealthy. That makes no sense right there. So if they're going to blame poor people, they really need to look back in their history. I think a lot of Europe is being miseducated on their responsibility and their role in the North Atlantic slave trade. I'm going to Nantes, La Rochelle. I was just in Saint-Denis and Bordeaux. Nantes, as you well know, please, one of the ports of the slave trade. The mayor of Nantes, when he saw my name, wanted to cancel and withdrew. I'm my first time here. He doesn't know me, but I'm Malcolm X's daughter, so he doesn't know what I'm going to say. But Nantes was a port of slave trade.
And it can be said.
What?
It shouldn't be said as. It shouldn't be said as such.
What?
He doesn't want it.
No, but listen. It may not be now, but it did happen. They can't say it didn't happen. It did.
That's something when I talk to people about, for instance, slavery and what happened in the reparations. people tend to say, I'm not guilty.
It was them, but they're not giving the money back or the
But there's
resources that they took.
There's something else apart from being guilty, and that is responsibility. Because people can have the ability to respond even if they're not guilty.
Well, you know what? For instance, I was in Martinique last year, and it disgusted me. It's paradise. It disgusted me that a lot of the French, 2010, basically said, I was at a hotel, and some Europeans said, oh, isn't it lovely being in France? You're not in France, you're in the Caribbean. You still haven't given those colonies up. You're not, Guadeloupe is in France, it's in the Caribbean. But there are people who still say, this government still claims it as theirs. That's disgusting and unheard of. They're still raping the benefits, especially, there's a group called the BKs. They're descendants of the slave owners. They own 85% of the land. How does that happen? Haiti, Slave Island, the only slave island freed themselves, had to give reparations back to France. And it broke them. Why? Because they deprived France of labor and finance, meaning slaves and the land that they took. How does that make any sense? And they had to give money back to France in payment back. And unfortunately, Toussaint Louverture was so naive, thinking now that he's head of state and a statesman, came to France to give the money to thought he was going to be treated like a statesman, and they put him in prison here and he died.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Revolution, 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 revolution.